on, guys? Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to give you a walk around video of a 997 Carrera 4S Gen 1 Cabriolet. I'm going to walk around this car as if I've turned up to someone's driveway and I'm looking to purchase it, because there are quite a few common faults with these cars that are really easy to spot if you just know they're there. So let's have a walk around it, and I'm going to show you some of the things that you should consider checking out before actually purchasing one. So some of the faults that I'm about to highlight on these cars will require a ramp. So when I jump in to test drive the car, I will discuss through with you some of the things that you're only really going to ascertain whether there is a fault there if it is up in the air and you're looking at it from below. But the rest is pretty straightforward, and you can do so with the car on the ground. So let's jump in. I'm going to take you around this car, front to back, top to bottom, things that you need to look out for if you're looking to buy a 997 or a 987. I chose the 997 Cabriolet specifically because with it being a soft top roof, there are a couple more checks that you would need to do over a coupe. So a bit of a backstory with this car before we go into detail. This is a 997 Gen 1 C4S cab. So this has done about 61,000 miles and it's a 56 plate 2006 car. So this is a primary candidate for the dreaded ball scoring, but doesn't come into the category where you would be conscious of an IMS bearing because they were updated in 2005. Right, so let's get stuck in. First thing I always test, does the bonnet open on the key? Perfect. And then I'll go on in here and have a little poke around under here. So I'm speaking as if you guys are completely new to Porsches. So with the 911s, it's got a front boot, but no rear boot, obviously, because it's a rear engine car. With the Boxsters and the Caymans, there's a front and a rear boot. So under this little compartment here is where your battery lives. I always just have a look at it, just, you know, inspect the terminals to see if it's actually an original battery or anything like that. Obviously, this one's been changed. And just have a kind of visual inspection of everything under here. Little things like, is this actually like secured improperly? Do any of the wires look frayed? But other than that, there's actually not too much to look at. In addition to the Bose sound system, this also has the 6-disc changer for the CD. Make sure that works. Yeah, jobs are good. And then if you come under here, it will be slightly different on the coupes. The location of these articles. On the convertibles, it's always under this carpet. Just make sure your tire inflate is there and your locking wheel nut key and everything. On the coupes, it's actually behind a little sort of compartment that sits there. Next thing to look at is the panels themselves. Do they all line up? I mean, at the end of the day, these are relatively old cars, so they probably had paint at some point in their life. These, the front ends of these cars do actually take a bit of a beating with stone chips, so I do get it why people will paint them, but I want to inspect as to whether it's had a bit of a shunt somewhere. In these little vents are aircon condensers. There is only so much you can do, but try and have a real sort of visual inspection as to whether you think it's been pierced in any way. The reason I say that is because it's so common on these cars for aircon leaks, and that's usually because the stones come up like shunted through there, pierced it, and it's not the cheapest job in the world. So try your best just to have a look. I mean, you can see that this one's got a lot of dead bugs, but they actually look pretty good. A preventative measure of that, once you have purchased the car, is to go onto a website for a company called Sunsport, and they do these grill kits, which are lifesavers.
And now a word from our sponsors.
So you're telling me that the aircon condenser needs replacing and it's not under warranty? Well, how much is it then?
You f***ing what, mate? Don't be a f***ing How much?
Did you know that 1 in 10 people worldwide suffer from leaking aircon condensers? And that it's been clinically proven that people who have air conditioning are 100% happier than people who don't. It has also been clinically proven that people like to be happy. Do you like to be happy? If you live in fear of not being happy, let me introduce you to Sunsport grill kits. Sunsport. Sunsport is a company that invests in your happiness. They provide grill kits for not only aircon condensers, but also radiators. Not only does Sunsport provide a functional purpose in protecting your happiness, but they also enhance the look of your vehicle with a stylish mesh grille design, which will make you smile. And it's also been clinically proven that people like smiling. Do you like smiling? If you like smiling and being happy, head on over to Sunsport. Sunsport have a grill kit available for a wide range of manufacturers. And even if you don't see your vehicle listed on their website, Sunsport also provide custom kits. And as petrol heads, we know, we love custom anything. So why don't you take the first step to happiness today by heading on over to Sunsport.com. And to our loyal subscribers, we have provided you a discount code to get you on the road to a journey of either being really warm or really cold on your journey to marginal comfort in a very specific aspect of your life. Sunsport, the grill for everyone.
Sunsport does not endorse this message. In fact, they are now probably regretting sending Product Money Kits, the free grill you saw in this pre-recorded advert, if you can call this an advert.
We return you now to your regularly scheduled program.
The way to really test it is to go into the car, put the air conditioning on, put it as low as it can go. If it doesn't blow cold, then either it needed a regas anyway, which could be a possibility, or you do actually have a leak. It's pot luck. There is paperwork invoices to suggest that it's been regassed recently and all of a sudden it's not working. It probably is a leak, whereas if it hasn't been regassed in ages, it just might need regassing. Moving around to this wheel well here, and you will need a flashlight for this. Those two pipes are coolant pipes. They are susceptible for leaking. If it's the top one that's leaking, that is a cheaper repair than the bottom one. The bottom one's a bit of a bitch. Do have a look at those pipes, because if you can see any residual coolant leaking down, then yeah, they do need replacing. So what you'll find with any of the Porsches really of this generation, they do tend to get used as weekend toys and then they're washed and then parked up. So quite often they will have rusty brake discs. If you go and take the car on a test drive and then you come back and it's gone, happy days. But do bear in mind, a lot of the time, the inner side of the disc is actually the bit to worry about. The amount of times I replaced brake discs on these 911s purely because the inner side was, looking horrendous, even though the outer side didn't actually look too bad. So obvious ones as well, check your pads. They're quite easy to see on these cars, and just check that it's not overly lipped. Wheels, make sure they're not buckled or anything. You can see that this has had a wheel refurb because the outer edge is a little bit wavier. Tires as well, make sure that they're a decent brand. If they're still good brands but the front are different from the rear, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, you just want to make sure that they're half decent tires. It kind of shows that the owners put the money and the effort into actually keeping the car as good as possible. In addition to having a good brand of tire and a tire that has tread, you also want to make sure that the tire's not particularly old, in which case you are looking for this information here. It's going to depend on what sort of tire it is, but on the Bridgestone it's located just there. So this is a 2018 tire, so that's not particularly bad. And just on visual inspection there's no cracked outer edges, so those are good to go. Have a look at the wheel nuts as well. I know it sounds so pedantic, but they are susceptible for corrosion. You can actually buy caps that sit on them, and they're plastic, so it does look a lot better, but really you can swap them out to aftermarket ones which are made out of better materials, because Porsche seem to have not put their hands in their pockets when they brought these ones out. So with this being convertible, there is a whole other element to look at. So with these convertible roofs, I'm sorry, this one's a little bit fluffy at the moment, they will always have these sort of wear lines, and it's just from where it's gone up and down. It's fabric, it's going to happen. Don't have a cry about that. What you should have a cry about is if any of the stitching has come away, if there's any tears, if there's any of the seals that look like they're starting to perish. And the other thing to mention is the fact that they have these water drains that sit around sort of here. They can get clogged up. If they do get clogged up, the water's got to go somewhere, and sadly the water tends to travel through into the back here. So always just go and check the floors are completely dry. Obviously, if the car hasn't been recently washed or it hasn't recently rained, it's going to be a little bit harder to dictate, but I have literally just washed this car, so I can tell that it is absolutely fine. So looking at the rear quarters on these cars, this is a blatant giveaway as to whether the cars had paint or not, really. They usually have these stone chip guards that sit down here. Some people do remove them because the factory original ones do get this sort of like yellow discoloration. So I do get it. I have actually just taken them off my Cayman. But because the haunches on this car are so wide, they really do take a beating with stone chips. Another common place for these to sustain stone chips is actually just down here. So check this little arch bit here because they usually have paint starting to fall away. These aren't actually too bad here, which is quite nice, but sometimes you'll actually see rust forming, and it's an easy fix because it just requires shaving back and paint, but realistically, if you want it to be done properly, you're doing the whole side step there. The spoilers on the 911s are different from the Boxsters, the Caymans, the turbos. These ones literally just come up on a flap, whereas the rest of them, they're actually on legs. Make sure it works because it's a very expensive fix if they are broken. If you want to test that, the car has to be on and you'd be pressing this button down here next to the PASM suspension button. So before we even step into the car, one thing to look out for is, do these work? Yep.
Great success.
What that does is lifts the bonnet again and into the engine compartment. It's actually quite common for this switch panel to not work. I don't know if it's because maybe water gets in it or whatnot, but I've had to replace many of these panels. Another thing that is so common, albeit it's only aesthetic, but bugs the living daylights out of me. These buttons will always wear out. It's so annoying. To replace these, it's a bit of faff, and it's actually more expensive than it should be. If these start to fade away or they become sort of congealed because there's like a sort of coating on them that gets all sticky, these are so easy to replace and they cost like £10. The rest of the interior is really just normal bits to look for now. It's things like checking out the seats. I mean, you get a lot of bolster, like lumbar support on these, which is absolutely great because when you're sat in them, you really do get a lot of sort of side support around your ribs. But the problem with that is getting in and out of them, you're going to clip it, and it also depends what sort of size of person you are. But with things like this, I mean, I know that I can lightly repair that just with a little bit of dye, but really, if you wanted that immaculate, you'd be actually getting that whole strip done again, so have a look out for that. Also, a good dictator as to whether there's been kids in the car or, you know, a lot of passengers is just looking at the back of these seats and just seeing for little nicks and stuff. Look, this is all painted, so you know you're gonna get the odd mark here. This car's done 60,000 miles, and again, just at the rear, assessing the leather condition. And if you look around this sort of area, it's always gonna have a couple marks here just from where the seatbelt sort of snaps back and whatnot. It's more prevalent on the lighter color interiors. You won't see it so much with black. I mean, whilst this is a lovely color interior, as soon as you break through the top surface, it's really gonna become quite apparent. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with spec options on these cars, I'll just highlight them quickly on this car because it does have quite a few. That center console section there, that's actually a factory optional extra to have it in silver. Then it's got the heated seats. If you come around here, this is usually where you can dictate spec options. So you've got the heated seats there, you've got the PASM, which is located just down here. That is your active suspension management. Got the little spoiler button next to it. They all come with that. And then if you had sports chrono or sports exhaust, they would actually sit there as well. It's also got the sat nav option and the phone option. However, in this day and age, you really want to be swapping out to something a bit more modern, in which case there are aftermarket options for double DIN head units which incorporate Bluetooth, and they are actually quite easily interchangeable, and you can actually get a fascia sort of surround that makes it look factory, as is on my Cayman. And then this has also got the Bose sound system, albeit the standard sound system is actually pretty good on these, so don't let that be a game changer, but to have the Bose is quite a desirable optional extra just on paper. So in terms of cosmetics, that's really the highlighting points that I would be looking at when I come to look at these cars. We're going to move on to the mechanics, and we can do that without even starting the car. All it's going to require is that we go under here, and in order to do that, I'm just going to go and grab a towel. Now, the reason I actually picked this car is because I know it actually has a known fault underneath, albeit it's very minor, but it will just visually display to you guys why it is worthwhile crawling on the floor and going under the back here. So I've got to do this freehand, so it's gonna be a little bit shaky. I've got the flash on for you. If you crawl underneath, you'll see here, there's fresh oil. This has got a sump gasket leak. Again, not the end of the world, but if you're going to go and look at a car that you're potentially looking to purchase, you have just found a reason to knock some money off. Look, if it does have a sump gasket leak, it's not the end of the world, providing you do get the money off, because if you wanted to send the car in for a service because maybe it was due one, just tie the two together. Also, the reason why I know it's a gasket leak is because, look, there's not really any oil above it coming down, so it's not dripping, so it's not, the problem isn't higher up, and also there's residual oil all around the edges there. Moving past that, I mean, like I said, there's not too much that you can really look at because a majority of the stuff further along the car, it's all covered up. I won't lie to you, any of the 987 and the 997 Gen 1s, the whole exhaust system, it's just been made from such ill quality materials, so it's going to have signs of corrosion. I can guarantee that. So if you get under here and you freak out because maybe you're coming out of a different brand of car, it's so common to see this. I wouldn't cry about it. You can see like all the bolts are corroded. They use pretty shitty bolts from stock. It might be down the line where, you know, like if you get a manifold gasket blow, you do tend to rack up quite a big bill because the bolts don't come out nicely, which means that someone's got to take them out for you. And then usually a bolt will thread and it needs helicoiling in the block, which isn't great. With regards to things like the anti-roll bar and drop links and all the arms, again, you're just going to have to base it off the last MOT as to whether any of the bushes are worn or anything, but you can sort of climb under there and shake them around and see if you can hear any knocks. And also, when you test drive the car, if it knocks in any places, then maybe that's something that you're going to have to take into consideration, that it might be some of these components. You know what, actually, whilst I'm under here, 100% put your face under the car and make sure that the inner edge of the tires is not dramatically worn. These cars are slightly cambered at factory, which means the inner edges wear a lot more than the outer edges. So now that you're done crawling around under the car, it's time to actually get in and fire this bad boy up, and then we're going to take it out on a drive. Whilst out on the drive, I will discuss what you're all waiting for me to talk about, which is IMS, RMS, and bore scoring. Now, I want to do a whole separate video on bore scoring because that's actually what happened to my blessed little Cayman over there, which obviously, for those of you who are subscribed, you know I'm twin turboing that. So for now, I'm just going to highlight just the basics of how to figure out whether a car has scoring or not. All right, so it's actually time to pop on in. Okay, so first things first, before you've even fired the car up, and this is an important one because it will cost you time, put the key in the ignition. Don't fire it up. The only way it'll fire up is if you put your foot in the clutch. Just turn the ignition key once, just to wake the car up. Press this button down here. And you see it's reading the oil level there. So this car is golden. If you look at that oil level and it's anywhere sort of around the half mark or less, maybe you should worry a little bit because it could be using oil. You need to cross-reference it with the previous service. How long ago was it done? Because then you kind of get an understanding of how much oil it's lost. The starter motors are prone for squeaking and then failing. So if you start it up and you hear this like the best representation that I can do of the noise, you're going to hear this shrieking noise. That is a good indicator that the starter motor is on the way up. Second thing you're going to do, you're going to clutch in to start these cars. As soon as you fire it up, you're going to jump out the car, run to the back as quickly as you can, and see just how much smoke puffs out. Now we've got to be quick about this. You fire it up, and then jump out and run to the back. What you're looking for is smoke. Ordinarily, if these cars have been sat up for a little while, it will puff out a chunk of smoke, but then it should disappear really quickly, and it should not be, there shouldn't be any lingering smoke around there. What you're going to do after you've done your test drive is actually bring the car back, turn it off, and then turn it back on again and do a hot start. If it produces smoke on a hot start, then you might be in trouble. So once you're outside the car and it's running, you want to bring your ear to this arch and listen out for a very, very distinctive, horrible tap noise. Now, there's two types of tap noises. You've got your bore scoring tap noise, and then you've got your sticky tappets noise. The sticky tappets noise is a very light metallic noise, so it's if you hear that and, you know, you try and believe the owner when he says, oh, it's been sat up a while, that's fine again. All you got to do is take the car for a test drive, put it through its paces, and if the noise disappears, it's probably sticky tappets. So let's have a quick look in the engine bay whilst it's running. So you can see here, that is your alternator. That looks relatively new, so that's probably been replaced, which is great. This is where air feeds in. Try to never get water in there. And then just having a general assessment of whether you can see any form of leaks. Again, bring a torch with you just to have a good look around the top of the engine. I know it's a small compartment and you're not going to be able to see too much. Again, when the car's not running, which I failed to mention earlier, just pop that cap off and just see if there's any sort of milky residue under there. Pay attention to the coolant because these are known for coolant leaks, like I said, and also in conjunction with maybe a bit of milk in here. And maybe when you test drive it, it overheats. That would suggest head gaskets. So just make sure the level is correct on there. Alrighty then, let's go out for a spin and I'll tell you everything else that could potentially be wrong with a 997. Whilst you're in here, you might as well test out all the buttons here. So, sound system, just make sure all the speakers are working. Heated seats, you press once and you're gonna get full heat, and then if you press again, it's half heat. Just while you're sat here, you might as well whack it on full heat and just wait for your butt to warm just to see if it actually does work. In conjunction with what I was saying earlier about the aircon condensers, when the car is warm, put it onto low, whack the fan up as high as it can go. The way to tell whether the air conditioning's on or off is this little indicator here. If you've got that little snowflake, it means the aircon's on. If you press eco and that light is illuminated, it means the aircon's off. So make sure that you've got that, so the air conditioning's on, and just test all the vents and make sure that it's working, and freeze your ass off basically. With regards to the PASM, you're not going to know whether it's working or not until you're out on the road and you feel it's whether it's stiffer or not, but you can always test that it actually illuminates. And then again, you can, if it's got nav, just make sure that the disc is actually in there and it's working, which if it gets to this point, then yes, it is working. Also, you can always just pop this and just make sure that the cup holders work, because sometimes this gets jammed, and just make sure that they're all intact because they are quite flimsy, so they do tend to break, and just make sure that they pop back in perfectly and go up like that. So if it's convertible, your roof button's down here, pull it back and just make sure that it all operates as it should. It shouldn't be squeaky, it should be quick, it shouldn't be jolting in any way, and that should just fall down very easily, and then all your windows will come back up. Alrighty, let's go out for a spin. Right, while I let everything else warm up, let's just talk about the big three. So you've got the RMS, which is your rear main seal, the IMS, which is your intermediate shaft bearing, and then you've got ball scoring. So the RMS, the rear main seal, is a seal that actually sits on the flywheel and it's about yay big. And it's rubber, so it has the ability to perish. Obviously, you're never gonna see its true condition until the gearbox is taken off, but a giveaway as to whether that seal might be starting to leak is actually, if you pop it up on the ramp and look at the join between the engine and the gearbox, and sometimes you might see minor sweating, and that's not such a big deal, but if you can actually see quite a profuse leak, then that's a sign that maybe the rear main seal's on its way out. The IMS is probably one of the most talked about things on forums. It is ridiculous, and the funny thing is it's so discussed, and yet you don't actually see that many failures in this generation of 911 and Cayman Boxsters. So the IMS is actually this little bearing that sits on the intermediate shaft on the flywheel end as well. Here you can see that there's 3 bolts at the bottom by the sort of flywheel. I'm never worried about IMS bearings on cars that are 2005 and younger. I think it was mid 2005 that Porsche actually factory upgraded the IMS on these cars. So obviously you need to refer to the V5 to see when it was actually made, but it was more of a 996 thing. So, you know, when you're looking at something like this, if it's 2005 or newer, don't sweat that too much. Bore scoring, yes, bore scoring is my biggest fear when buying these. And as much as in this video I've tried to give you a couple of tips as to look for the signs, honestly, just get it scoped. Just literally send it to a specialist. There's actually mobile guys that can come out and look at the car and get a scope put down the cylinders to look for bore scoring. That's the only way that you're really going to know. So if you're looking at any of the S models, because it's really the S models that suffer from it most, then yeah, I highly recommend to go get it checked, regardless of how it looks or sounds. If you're buying privately, it's a bit of a hassle because you need to try and convince the guy or girl that you know, you'll take the car, you'll put a deposit down, but they've got to send it to the specialist to have this checked, or you know, have a mobile guy rock up in their driveway. So some people do get a little bit funny about that, but screw it, like that's not something you mess around with. So forcibly make them or move on to another car. So the main aim of test driving the car, other than making sure it functions as a car, is knocks, bangs, rattles. So with the convertibles, the one extra thing to listen out for is roof rattles. It is so unlikely that you will hear a roof rattle on a 911. They are very, very well built cars. But if you can hear a rattle or any sort of like audible wind noise coming from around the windows or up top, maybe the seals are worn out, so that isn't actually a cheap job to do. So do listen out. You might need to pick up some speed in order to be able to actually hear it. Suspension knocks, so it could be either top mounts. So if you get this distinctive sort of like, I'm loving my sound effects in this video. When you go over sort of bumps and undulations, it might be the top mounts. I've had to replace a fair few, albeit they have majority been on Caymans actually. Crack springs is another one, because they are cars that sort of get washed, sat up, or if it's lived somewhere by the sea or anything, the springs can become corroded, and obviously with them having to take so much pressure, they will actually crack. You can have a look when you're walking around the car. You can sort of jump under the arches and try and see as best possible, but realistically you're not going to know until one, it's on a ramp, or when you're driving it, you would hear that. It's quite a distinctive knock. Next thing is clutches. The amount of times I've gone to look at cars and take them on a drive, low mileage cars as well, and they do tend to be town and city cars, where the cars had only done like between 30 and 40,000 miles. You took it on a drive and the clutch is slipping. Most of the time the cause of that is the fact that because they are in a town sort of situation, it's a lot of start, stop, riding clutch. So the way to test that is put it into third, slow right down, get the revs sort of around 1.5 to 2, and then put your foot flat. It should just pick up gradually, but it should not slip. If it slips, you'll watch the revs go whee, but the car's actually not moving. And again, you can do it in fourth as well, because fourth is quite a low bearing gear. With regards to the steering, it's one of the things that I love about these cars the most actually. It's just how direct the steering is, how much feedback it gives you. They're such planted cars. They are just such fantastic driver's cars. The thing to look out for is that if you're turning through corners and things and it feels a little bit washy, and there's quite a bit of play in the wheel when you're doing sort of just side to side motions like this, the wheels should be moving with you. If it's kind of like slow and wallowy, then maybe the steering rack's seen better days. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a couple other things to look for that you will only really be able to see if it's up on a ramp. So if you are in a lucky enough position that you do get to see the car on a ramp before you purchase it, if you can get all the trays underneath removed, that's when you're going to see all the lines, because those lines are a big one. The last bill that I saw for someone that had to do all the brake lines was $2.5 grand, so it's well worth checking. Making mention to paperwork with these cars. I love you Porsche buyers, but I'm sorry, you are pedantic mother. The car could be perfect, but they want the trifecta. They want low ownership, perfect service history, and a perfect car. So with regards to the service history, if you're thinking from a residual value standpoint, make sure it is pretty much every 2 years. Spark plugs need to be done every 4 years or 60,000 miles, and the drive-by belt, I believe, is also 60,000, I think 6 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. If it's maybe you missed one service by, you know, 8 months to a year, then fine. Like that, again, if it's been going off mileages, that's something that I'm happy with, but I'm just telling you that future buyers do tend to whinge. These cars are actually so cheap to maintain comparably with other sports cars of a similar price. But when they go wrong, like little niggly wrongs, end up being massive bills. So the more thorough you are when you're looking around it, could save you money down the line. So whilst I don't know absolutely everything, I am not a Porsche specialist, I have been around the block with these cars, and also they're just cars I love, so I do research them a lot. These are all the things that I've found to be common in terms of what I've had to do to these cars. So that's all from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this information useful, and to those of you who are looking to purchase either a 911, a Cayman or a Boxster, I hope it better prepares you for when you go to look at your first car. If you like this video, go on and hit that like button, and why not subscribe? I mean, it's free, and we're about to twin turbo this bad boy behind me. I want more. Let's have more.